What's up, guys? So today on Monk Mode, we're going to talk about willpower. Willpower. Where does it come from? How do we develop it, etc. And the reason I think it's important to talk about willpower right now, I just got done releasing some videos that followed a fast. I did a 3-day fast, water fast with a little bit of coffee, and had a great experience, and so on and so forth. And then I'm transitioning right from that fast into the carnivore diet, and then into intermittent fasting with the carnivore diet to see how that works for me. But one thing I will admit, if you want to try a day of fasting, a 2-day fast, a 72-hour fast, you should slowly build your way up. I must admit, it takes an immense amount of willpower, and not just the willpower to not eat something and to wait and suffer through it and so on and so forth, but also the willpower to not give in to, when your wife says, "Oh, come on, baby, just have a little bit tonight, have a small meal, and you have a small meal tomorrow. Just moderate. Don't be too extreme." And your wife is probably doing the right thing. She's looking after you. But the point is, the willpower to say, "No, I'm committed. This is what I'm doing," can be hard when it's coming at home late at night and so on and so forth. The willpower to stick to your guns when your friends invite you out to eat, to either say no or show up and be social and drink water and a little bit of coffee or tea. And to do that at Nobu or Mastro's, one of these nice restaurants where you're just like, yo, I gotta have this have this meal. And so the point is, and then just fasting in general is hard, especially if you eat a lot of sugar, because that is a drug. So fasting is tough and it takes willpower. And so I can recommend it to everybody to try, and give you information. But if you don't have the willpower to give it a shot, you're never going to understand the results. So I want to talk about willpower a little bit for that reason. The one thing I've heard that was interesting about willpower years ago was that, and it wasn't very scientific, the explanation, but that willpower is its highest in the morning. And it's like a gas tank. You have so much of it every day. And then it depletes throughout the day. And by the nighttime, that's when you have your least amount of willpower. And we all know that at night, that's typically when we need the most amount of willpower. That's when I like to eat my ice cream. That's when I like to get in an argument with my wife. And when I was young, that's when I like to get in trouble, if proverbially, but you know what I mean. But most bad stuff that we do, things that we do that we wish didn't happen, it typically doesn't happen at 3 p.m. or 8 a.m. in the night. It doesn't happen at noon. Doesn't typically happen at 4:30. The things that we end up going to jail for, sometime with domestic abuse, going to jail for at a club, so on and so forth, in the streets or whatever it is, or at a party, at a gala, when you have too much to drink or get out of line or whatever it is, drunk driving, getting home, all these moments where you're like, why did that person do that? They had so many other options. They could have called Uber. They could have called a friend. They're a celebrity. Why are they driving their own car when they have an entire entourage that was out with them that night? These dumb mistakes that people make that seem so dumb, I think a big reason is the lack of willpower at that point, at that time at night. The same thing is, why did you get into a fight with your spouse? Why did you get into an argument when you guys are about to go to bed and you can just talk about it in the morning? All these things involve willpower. And so there's a lot of reasons that I think this is an important conversation. I think emotional health comes from also not putting yourself in bad situations that you have to pull yourself out of. And also being able to manage your diet, manage your workout routine, get up in the morning, go to sleep on time. All these things require the without which there is nothing, willpower. Okay? So we're going to talk about it. I don't know. I think one of the words I think that is not talked about enough these days is discipline. It's like a naughty word all of a sudden. But discipline and willpower do to me I think they're slightly different. So I think, willpower comes first, discipline comes second, and we're going to talk about willpower today.
I'm going to share a little neuroscience tidbit.
Love it.
But I think it's one that you'll appreciate. Most people don't know this, but there's a brain structure called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. As we pointed out before, that's a noun, it's a name, it doesn't mean anything. Right. We could call it the Cookie Monster.
Right.
But what's interesting about this brain area is there are now a lot of data in humans, not some mouse study, showing that when people do something they don't want to do, like add 3 hours of exercise per day or per week, or when people who are trying to diet and lose weight resist eating something.
Right.
When people do anything that they, and this is the important part, that they don't want to do.
Right.
It's not about adding more work. It's about adding more work that you don't want to do.
Yes.
This brain area gets bigger.
Yep.
Now, here's what's especially interesting about this brain area to me. And by the way, I'm only learning this recently because it's new data, but there's a lot of it. The anterior mid-cingulate cortex is smaller in obese people. It gets bigger when they diet. It's larger in athletes.
It gets bigger when they diet. To me, dieting, well, I don't know if I'm right about that, but the willpower it takes to diet, I bet is similar to the willpower it takes or the fighting through the process of fighting through something hard with willpower it takes to fast. Interesting.
It's especially large or grows larger in people that see themselves as challenged and overcome some challenge.
Right.
And in people that live a very long time, this area keeps its size. In many ways, scientists are starting to think of the anterior mid-cingulate cortex not just as one of the seats of willpower,
Right.
but perhaps actually the seat of the will to live.
See, now we're talking.
And when I learned about the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, I was like almost out of my seat. And I've been in the neuroscience game since I was 20.
Now
We're the
we're
same
talking.
age. And I was so pumped because I've heard of the amygdala, fear, prefrontal cortex, it's planning and action. I could tell you every brain area and I teach neuroanatomy to medical students. But when I started seeing the data on the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, I was like, whoa.
And just a quick pause here, and I think for anyone who's struggling with willpower or giving up a bad habit or anything like that, I think listening to this is super important. I think when people have are trying to recover from drug addiction, for instance, they say that it helps to go to the gym. There's better outcomes of people who are going through rehab and on their way out of a program or something that integrate workouts, exercise while they're going through rehab, and maintain an exercise routine on their way out. And, I always thought that this was just because, number one, it gives them that feeling of, the endorphins and the dopamine release. And there's a lot going on chemically when you exercise, right? So I figured that more than what I just talked about, I figured that was one of the reasons that it helped, because then they crave the drugs less. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons that it does help. Going to a gym, inherently going to a gym is a community. Showing up, a sense of accomplishment on the way out. Sometimes we lack that sense of accomplishment and we feel empty. And we move to drugs to fill that void and so on and so forth. But what I'm hearing here is, I think, and maybe I'm just, there's too much conjecture on my side. I think what I'm hearing is that if you do hard things in the gym, push yourself in the gym, squat hard, squat heavy, deadlift heavy, or just do lots of push-ups and calisthenics and abs and run or something. But if you're at the gym, potentially also doing something hard, that you're building the actual the part of your brain is actually getting bigger. That part of the part of the brain that governs willpower is actually getting bigger. So when you need to put down depending on what drug it is, the pipe or the pill or whatever it is, the dust, you have that willpower from the gym to do that, because you've kept this part of your brain big, and apparently can get smaller when you're not doing hard things. So that's really interesting. There's other hard things you can do besides just going to the gym, but it sounds like there's a connection between doing hard things and being able to not do things that are hard for you not to do, that are bad for you, drugs, etc.
This is interesting.
Yep.
And all the data point to the fact that we can build this area up.
Yep.
But that as quickly as we build it up, if we don't continue to invest in things that are hard for us, that we don't want to do, that's the part that feels so Goggins-esque
Yes, sir.
to me, that we don't want to do. Like if you love the ice bath, I love the ice bath, and you go from 1 minute to 10 minutes, guess what? Your anterior mid-cingulate cortex did not grow.
None.
But if you hate the cold water, if you're afraid of drowning and you get into water and put your head under,
Yep.
then your anterior mid and survive, then the anterior mid-cingulate cortex gets bigger.
So listen to this. I'm going to make a t-shirt that says, do things you hate. Do things you hate. I think, like things that are generally positive, like exercise, work, or whatever. Or apologizing is something that people hate to do. But this is so interesting because he's saying, assuming the data that he's referencing is right, and I think it's right, and his instincts around it are right. Otherwise, I don't think he'd present it to us. But what he's saying is that it's not enough to just do hard things and build up that willpower and, see the results of the willpower to know you're doing enough hard things. But if you stop doing hard things, you won't be able to access that same willpower because that part of your brain that governs your ability to have that type of willpower shrinks. So it's just like a muscle. It has to be built and it has to be maintained. It has to be built and it has to be maintained. I think that's a very important point to make. So I love what he's talking about when he's talking about cold plunging. I cold plunge, and there's weeks when I do it 2 to 3 times a day. There's weeks when I don't do it at all. And I do know when I come back, it hurts. And so long story short, he's saying if you start cold plunging, you want the long-term benefits of cold plunging beyond what's happening chemically when you do it and so on and so forth. But the willpower benefits, you have to do it every day. And then you have to find a way to make it harder to do so you can continue to exercise your willpower to do something you don't want to do and get that muscle in your brain bigger. I'm going to call it a muscle from now on.
But if you don't do it the next day, or if you do it the next day and you enjoy it, because hey, I did it yesterday, woohoo, happy me, Merry Christmas, as you would say.
Merry Christmas.
Guess what? The anterior mid-cingulate cortex shrinks again.
Yep.
To me, this is one of the most important discoveries that neuroscience has ever made, because it's that I don't want to do something, but do it anyway.
That's right.
That grows this area. And it's almost like I have a friend, he's been sober 30 years from alcohol. And he always says, the amazing thing about addiction is there's a cure. The problem is it only works one day at a time.
Yep.
And so you have to renew it every day.
That's right.
So the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, to me, when I learned about it, two things went off in my head. Whoa, this is super interesting. And 2, I got to tell David Goggins about this. And I waited until now to tell you because I felt like, for obvious reasons, I wanted to tell you and I wanted to tell you here.
Well, I love that because that's how I've lived my entire life. I don't know anything about that. But people go, man, you have such a strong will. It's something that you build. Like, I never forget, I was on a podcast one time, and this dude goes, you were blessed with a strong mind. Like, the hell are you talking about? I was blessed with a strong mind. That's something that you have to develop. You develop that over years, decades of suffering and going back into the suffer. That's why a lot of people who graduate Navy SEAL training, they want to know, like, I talk about very openly all the time. A lot of guys don't want to go back into that water. Don't want to go back into the hard stuff. Maybe not anything hard in life. Once you get through it, it's like you become a POW. Like, how many POWs want to go back to POW camp? None. When something sucks so bad in life, this is on this that we're talking about now, very few people want to go back. They're happy they graduated. I realized I'm the same way. I don't want to go back. I have to go back. I must go back because that is exactly where all the knowledge of my life exists, was back there and what you're talking about. Well, I didn't know anything about this, but how I grew a will was constantly doing these things. To now, it's just life. I wake up, while it still sucks, it's just life. You don't sit back and like, oh my God, like I have days I don't want to do it, but I know I'm going to do it. I know
that's discipline. That is discipline to do it. And I think we all have to have a reason to have discipline. Sometimes we get up and do it because we got no choice. We can't pay the bills if we don't do it. Our family won't be safe if we don't do it. We'll die if we don't do it. All of a sudden, when you're in your deathbed, not everybody's able to do it, but a lot of people can make changes when it comes to addiction, work, or whatever. When their back is against the wall, I think they need a reason. But it's interesting that if you proactively make a practice of doing hard things, maybe you don't have to wait for a tragedy to have the discipline to do the things you know you should do.
From years of just doing it. So that's beautiful. And this is why I came on here with you today. And I'm glad that you're talking about this, because human beings need to hear this. They need to stop hearing these hacks on this and that. There's no fucking hack, bro. There's no fucking hack. Yeah, you may this and that and saunas and all this shit yeah, it's great. There is no fucking life hack. To grow that thing, how do you grow it? Do it and do it and do it and do it. That's the hack. The hack is gonna fucking suck. And that's what I realized. That's what I realized. Life, that's why I wanted to come on here today. I didn't want to come on here and talk about no fucking passion and purpose and how to get the fuck out of bed and how to hit a fucking alarm clock and all this catchphrase bullshit. Because that wasn't how I lived. That wasn't how I lived. I woke up like every human being does and goes, fuck, man, I'm a fucking piece of shit today. How the hell is this going to work out for me? And you fight that. You don't override it. There's no override button. It's the conversation in your fucking, in your head.
And a quick pause here, because just something that came to my mind. I think if you're looking for something hard to do, and you're not sure what it is, maybe you're already doing some form of exercise, but you're still struggling. I feel like most people who commit to regular exercise do pretty well. But if you're looking for something else, maybe consider just committing to getting up out of bed at a time that is uncomfortable for you to do every morning, whether that's 4 a.m., 4:30, 5, or whatever. And also requiring yourself to go to sleep so you can get your 8 hours. Maybe start there, and just knowing that and believing that every time you get up on time and don't hit the snooze button, and you go through that uncomfortable feeling of crawling out of the bed, getting up, walking into the shower, maybe making it cold for a little bit, and getting downstairs and just getting to your coffee or whatever you start the morning with. Every time you go through that horrible experience, and it feels horrible, that you're developing this part of your brain, and you're going to have a better week. You're going to have a better day, but long term, you're going to get long-term benefits out of it. If you have this belief, maybe you'll have the motivation to get up and go through that tough part of waking up in the morning. It's usually just 5 to 7 minutes. If you can just get through that, you're good. Get up and flip your lights on. It hurts, right? And I don't know if that's the right process to waking up, but whatever you can do, just remember what you're doing at that moment is making you stronger. You're getting stronger in real time, just like you're doing the last rep when you're lifting weights. So I think there's definitely something here, and I believe in it.
So how do you do that? We don't have enough of these conversations about the real conversation that every human being is having. And they have no idea how to get out of it, but they do. It's that shit right there, man. You gotta build your will. How do you build your will? Exactly what you said, man. Exactly what you said.
Well, I feel like
I'm really interested now that we're finding out, we grow up talking about willpower. I went to military school, played sports. My dad was is a minister. We talk about willpower a lot. As an athlete, we talk about willpower, and it's one of those things that we didn't understand there was a chemical thing going on. There's actually a physical part of our brain responsible for it. I wonder if faith activates a certain part of the brain. Can developing faith make a certain part of their brain stronger? Does that help you not be depressed? Because some people think having faith is the key to being happy and not being depressed. I don't know. I'm just curious. So because I would have never thought willpower actually had a part of the brain that was responsible for it, that grows with hard things.
Knowing the name of something, anterior mid-cingulate cortex, doesn't fundamentally change us. But one thing I like about biology is that willpower, if somebody feels they don't have it, feels like this thing that other people have, but everybody, unless they're brain damaged, like a hole through their head, has 2 anterior mid-cingulate cortex, 1 on each side of their brain. Everyone has 1. They have 2. So I feel like it's just a question of opening the portal. And the portal, I'm going to say 10 times and forgive me, is I think people go, oh, I do hard things. I do sets to failure, and then I do forced reps. I love training with weights. I love doing sets to failure. I even like forced reps. But guess what? I like forced reps. So I'll tell you, they don't build my anterior mid-cingulate cortex.
Right.
Because I like to do it.
That's right.
Anything you like to do is not going to enhance this aspect of willpower. And it seems so obvious once you hear it. You kind of go, oh yeah, of course. But I think you really close that loop for people when you share what you're sharing today.
And it's interesting. We talk a lot. You hear people say, at least I've heard people say, just like you do it, and then you do it again, and then it gets easier, and then it becomes an avalanche, and and so on and so forth. Motivational speakers, and they're right. But this idea, this is just so new, at least for me, that when you're doing it, what they're saying is for sure true, because there's something going on chemically. To be honest, that is so powerful. And then please key in on. It's not just doing hard things, right? Because hard things are important to do. It's not just doing hard things. And I like to say doing hard things by yourself is one of the best ways to build confidence and so on and so forth. But it's doing things you don't want to do. Things that were formerly hard for you that are no longer hard for you, don't check the box. Things that are hard that you actually still find hard to do, but you find that you get a lot of joy out of doing it. You actually get a lot of satisfaction, and it's fun, or it's fulfilling for you, and it's also hard. Do not check the box. It's got to be things that you don't want to do that you actually do. Not vices, things that are positive, things that move you forward in your life forward and something forward. Doing things you don't want to do. Saddling up anyway.
And what you've shared elsewhere before as well, when you're trying to explain, the friction is the critical ingredient.
Right.
And I think people think, oh, if it's effort, well, then I'm getting better. That's part of it, necessary but not sufficient, as we say in science. But the suck part, the being haunted, the stick, they're really unpleasant terms.
Very.
These are probably the most unpleasant terms we've ever used on this podcast.
Very.
Those are the levers. Those are the gears. And without those, this thing that you're talking about, David Goggins, as a verb.
Right.
I sometimes make the joke, but it's not a joke.
Right.
Goggins is a name, and it's a verb. People go, I'm going to Goggins that.
Right.
Right? But that's, I think, again, I'm not a psychologist, but I think that's what you're talking about. The stick, the friction, being haunted. It's the suck part that grows this anterior mid-cingulate cortex.
So now you know why there's so many people that fail in this world to figure out their purpose in life. Where do I go? Because to grow that, while you may not look like me, how my daily life looks, it don't look fun. Don't look fun. So it's a choice that people have to make in life. But what's so funny about it is even the richest of rich, who have everything, they always ask me this question. I feel like I'm missing something. I don't feel like I'm missing shit.
It's interesting. My dad, I talk about him a lot because I grew up going to church and he was my minister, and he's also my boxing coach. And he talked a lot about the true test of a man is not what he can do, but what he can do without. What he can do without, which is also hard. But it's just something to think about. Can you live a life denying yourself of things that you want? But now I perceive it as a way to become a man.
I don't have what you all have, but you'll never in my life hear me tell you I'm missing something. Everybody is. They're missing this feeling. I found it a long time ago. I found it right there in that willpower thing. When you're nothing, and change yourself into something like me, you call it happiness, peace, whatever the fuck you want to call it, people are missing exactly what went on with David Goggins. Why don't you smile? I do. But I figured something out. That's why you'll never hear me say I'm missing something. I found it years ago. You find it in the suck.
It reminds me a lot of Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis is a friend of mine, and I've spent quite a bit of time with him. Always somebody I looked up to. And, I used to think it was all theatrics, the intensity he was showing the camera. And what I found is he's always that intense at all times. And because if you ask him, he would say it's because he understands the same thing that David Goggins is talking about. It's that, and Ray would always say, on the other side of pain is greatness. On the other side of the things that you don't want to do, going through the friction, going through the pain. He talks about pain. He says that's where you find greatness. It's found through pain, and that you get through that pain with effort, and so on and so forth. So if any of you guys are Ray Lewis fans, now go back and reflect on that with this lens. Ray was actually helping you at a scientific level as well.
You find it in the suck, and you find it repeatedly in the suck, to the point where you know exactly who you are. Most people are missing something because they don't know who they are. They never examine themselves. They've never done this experiment on themselves. The lab rat, we're all lab rats, but you're also the scientist. You create your own self. Most people are missing something because there's so much trapped in there. I don't even want to say potential. I think that's word used out too much too. There's so much in you that God, or wherever the hell you believe in, or if you're an atheist, in you, that you have not unlocked. That you walk around with this gorgeous wife or great husband and all this money, you're like, God, I feel like I'm missing something. Yeah, because it's about 75% of you is still fucking in there.
Great point. That's funny. Goggins, he's great for those moments. I sometimes I don't follow him, and then sometimes he says something like that, and I'm like, amen. He's a tremendous dude. But yeah, and I think there's many ways to find yourself in a period of depression, feeling depression. Sometimes it's, there's not much you can do about it, and you really need to seek therapy and help, or potentially medication for that's what I've been told, at least. There's different degrees of it and different reasons people are in depression. Sometimes it's trauma related. There's a lot, but then sometimes there's people who are experiencing depression who have achieved so much that people want, and so on and so forth, and have had a good life, and parents didn't abuse them, and so on and so forth, and they still find themselves in a deep, dark hole. And sometimes I wonder, or they're great athletes and win the Olympics or something, if there's a side of their life where, like he said, 75% is still under the fold. And I'm not sure what that is, but could it just this instinct, this inner feeling that you can't quite explain, that's telling you I'm unfulfilled, not maybe unfulfilled, but I'm unrealized. Maybe I'm 90% unrealized. I'm only doing 10% of what I know I'm capable of doing. Walking around with that feeling at the age of 52, could that just be one of the most common causes of depression, aside from trauma and all these other things that we know typically end up in depression? I don't know, but it's an interesting thought.
Chained up because you just didn't want to find your willpower, didn't want to find your soul, your will, your heart, your determination, your guts, your courage. And what that looks like, it looks scary, like your little scary lab I went in. Scary to wake up every day and say, I'm stupid, but I want to figure out a way to be smarter. Versus saying, man, I just can't do that. So you limit this box. So your box becomes so small of things you can do. My box wasn't even a box. It was a fucking little pinhole. And then through examining myself, getting some willpower, some courage, it became bigger than this table. But that's what we all do. That's why I wanted to come here today and talk to you about real shit. Not no fucking hacks. There's no hacks, bro. It's you against you. You against you. And if you misunderstand that, you have a real problem. A real problem. I can understand you misunderstand me running down the street, shirt off, fuck this, yeah. I can get it. I get it. If you misunderstand what I'm saying right now today, the problem is you. And you don't want to fix it.
Hey man, and I'm really glad Huberman brought on Goggins to discuss this. It's something that I think anything we need to know how to do, whether it's finance, carpentry, sports, nutrition, and the other 99.5% of things, important things out there that people need to know that I can't think of right now, are all those things are on YouTube. Like all that information, somewhere on Google. You can find it on your laptop and computer with your cell phone. But to do those things, it takes willpower. And, motivation can help, drive, the feeling of purpose, and all these things can help. But at some point, willpower is going to have to kick in. Like Ray Lewis would always say, at some point, they're going to have to play football, where they're going to have to go and do, he would always tell his team, we're going to fight. Let's keep, no matter what, don't get discouraged when we're dealing with our opponent, because at some point we're going to push them and force them to play football. And what he's saying is we're going to force them at some point. We're going to force the opposing team into their outside of their comfort zone. And that's what he meant. That's called playing football. How do you operate? How do you execute when you're uncomfortable and you don't want to do what's required? How do you perform there? And he always felt that his team, because he prepared them, would be better to live in that space and to operate and to thrive in that space of being uncomfortable, because they do it more often. They can handle it, and they have the willpower to be the normal version of themselves, or even a better version of themselves under those types of circumstances. So hopefully, this left you with something. I definitely learned something. I'm definitely going to take it into my training, what I do with my family, myself, my personal life, my health, etc. And hopefully read more about it.